Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and today I want to talk about how you can really find inequality anywhere if you really want to. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I recently read a news story about a professor from John Jay City University here in New York City, who basically put out a statement basically saying that the government should stop basically giving tax benefits to married couples because it perpetuates racial inequality because white people are basically a larger portion, or the larger portion of people who are married are white than black. Now, if you look at it that way, you can find inequality in anything, and you can find basically the amount of people who are married, the amount of people who are single, the amount of people who are anything aren't always going to be perfectly equal among any kind of demographic, whether it be by age, whether it be by race, by ethnicity, by gender, etc. Okay, so I get it from an academic point of view, where when you are an academic at a university, you kind of earn your spot by trying to put together papers, and just putting together a paper that kind of reaffirms sort of established truths, or basically reestablishes things that have already been proven, and just basically or test methodology. Those papers don't get a lot of attention. It's always the papers that try to make some sort of new sort of alarmist statement, okay, by basically using data or shaping data to say what you want it to say. Okay, because again, you can measure data in any way to make any narrative. Because again, why do we have to look at the portion of people who are married by race? Why don't we look at it by age? So in that case, then if there's like really young people who aren't married, well then it's disproportionately affecting them. So it's ages. You can make that claim on any metric, and you can create the data to make that narrative if you really want. Okay, you can say, hey, it's unfair to single people. You can do that. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean there aren't inequities in society. I'm not saying that. But this sort of mantra of always trying to one-up everybody else in where these inequalities exist and calling it racism is a different story. Now, again, there are inequities in society in the way things are distributed, etc. It's not because people are free. It's because a lot of people weren't free for a very long time. Okay, basically, yes, markets have only been available to everybody for a very short period of time in history, and then literally the minute they became available, we decided to regulate it to death, and basically increase the cost of those opportunities all over again, which does benefit the established wealth. To me, there you have a much bigger perpetuation of existing inequities, in a sense. So basically what happened is you have this inequity that built up because other people weren't allowed to participate in the economy. They weren't allowed to work, they weren't allowed to own property, etc. for a very long time. Okay, so then there was this group that did have access to markets that benefited it from it. Cool, so now they have all this wealth. That's unfair. So now markets are available, now everyone can own property, can have jobs, etc. But then what happens? We decide to put in regulations and barriers and taxes, etc., that make these opportunities really expensive. But who can afford all that? Who can afford to pay for those opportunities? Those who already have the established wealth. Okay, so all these regulations, yeah, is annoying for those who have the established wealth, but they can deal with it because they have the resources to deal with it. Who it hurts is that person who doesn't come from a lineage that had access to markets prior, and now it's harder for them to start a business. It's harder for them to get ahead because of these regulations and taxes. That much further perpetuates sort of disparities in society. It's and agreed that tax codes can create favoritism. That's why there should just be a simple flat tax code, if any at all. But again, trying to make everything a issue of racism, and then that the only reason that policy exists is racism. No, because it affects other people and other groups as well. But at the end of the day, most of the time, those individual rules do favor incumbents. Okay, at the end of the day, complexity favors incumbents. The people in power, because they're the ones who create the rules, so they understand that complexity the best, and they're also the ones most able to deal with those complexities. And that goes for all societies, all countries, all communities, all organizations, not just governments and countries. Okay, those who are in charge, who make the rules and make the rules complex, will always benefit from that complexity at the disadvantage of everybody else. That's the bottom line. But when you start making it too much about one particular sort of binary, one particular access, you start creating this division and resentment that's not productive, because at the end of the day, that stranglehold, that complexity hurts everybody who isn't an incumbent. So even if you're the child of someone who is an incumbent, you're at a disadvantage because you can't do things for yourself without the wealth that your family established per se. So you're at a disadvantage as well. Everyone who wasn't there when those rules were created is at a disadvantage. That's why rules should be simple, because they're more fair. But that doesn't necessarily mean we need to make everything hey, this is a cultural war, a social war, etc. We don't need to try to find inequality, racism, sexism in every different metric just for the sake of doing so. That only divides society further, and honestly, it's to me bad academics. You're trying to construct problems to look sort of intellectually clever, but you should be really not trying to find specific, like for example, that's really specific, but the greater trend again is what I said, the complexity versus incumbents. That's a model that can be applied to pretty much all these different situations, that gets at the underlying truth, that gets at the underlying solution, which is to simplify the rules and disempower the power that people exercise over each other. Which is a much more productive conversation to me than any of these specific, let's set these people against these people kind of conversations. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. Again, just to reiterate, I'm not saying that there aren't inequalities that exist in society, but I'm saying that most of the time they exist because there isn't enough freedom, not because there's too much. Have a great day and enjoy.